2 decades since its original release, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door has attained something of a legendary status. Getting an objective, modern view of a game like Thousand Year Door is difficult because it's draped in so much nostalgia. For this reason, I always find it incredibly interesting to dive into the NWR archives for a game like this and see how people talked about it before its reputation had been established. It's the advantage of having a Nintendo website that's been around for a quarter of a century. I honestly do this a lot whenever there's a remaster, re-release, remake, whatever on the way, just like there is right now with Thousand Year Door, and so I figured that this time I'd bring you along. So join me as we open up the NWR time capsule and explore Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. So how this works is that NintendoWorldReport.com has a game profile for pretty much every game that's been released on a Nintendo system over the past 25 years or so. So we can pull up the profile for Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door and see the reviews, previews, features, editorials, news stories, essentially any article the game has ever been tagged in, even before it was called Thousand Year Door, as is the case with the very first mention of its existence on NWR from March 31st, 2004, in a news article by Mike Sklens simply titled Paper Mario 2 on the Way. The latest issue of Famitsu Weekly has revealed that the popular Japanese gaming magazine will be unveiling the sequel to the Nintendo 64 title Paper Mario. The update to Mario Story, the Japanese title for Paper Mario, will be released sometime later this year in Japan. It will feature the same paper-like 2.5D graphics that its predecessor was known for. According to this article, Mario will even be able to fold himself into a paper airplane and fly around. There is currently no news on this title coming to North America or Europe, but it's likely that this news will be revealed sometime closer to E3. As Mike alludes to in this article, we would indeed learn more about the game about a month and a half later at E3 2004. Here, Carly Young, Michael Cole, and Chris Martino all got a look at the game, and both Michael and Chris went hands-on with the E3 demo. According to their previews, the E3 demo featured 3 playable areas: Star Crystal Field, Hooktail Castle, and Bogley Forest. Each of these paired the players with a different companion, Goombella, Koops, and Flurry, respectively. Both Michael and Chris highlighted how similar Paper Mario 2, we still didn't have an official title at this point, was to the original on Nintendo 64, which was only 4 years old at this point. The theater-themed battle scenes and the new companion characters were a big focus of both these previews, as was the paper airplane transformation that originally appeared in the previous news story. They also mentioned stumbling into the ability to turn Mario sideways, but at this point they hadn't seen any practical use for the mechanic, and weren't sure exactly what it was for. Now, keep in mind that at this point, there were often still huge gaps between when Nintendo released a game in Japan and when it was released in the rest of the world. For Thousand Year Door, the initial Japanese version released on July 22nd of 2004. That's just a couple of months after those E3 previews. The US release wasn't until 3 months later, on October 11th. The European and Australian versions, meanwhile, didn't release until November 12th and 18th, respectively. Now, this early Japanese release date gave former NWR director Jonathan Metz the opportunity to import and play the full game prior to its release in America. So on August 23rd of 2004, we posted one more preview based on the full Japanese retail version. I'll highlight as well that at this point, we are still referring to it as Paper Mario 2. We are just a couple of months from launch and evidently don't have a title yet. These impressions of the Japanese version echo many of the feelings from the E3 previews. Johnny is largely positive on the game mechanically and highlights how similar it looks and feels to the Nintendo 64 game. He does also point out that the Thousand Year Door doesn't make use of any of the unique elements found in Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga, which had been released the previous year on the Game Boy Advance. He had reviewed the game in November of 2003 and gave it a 9.5 out of 10. Now, all that being said, Johnny doesn't read Japanese, so this was posted purely as a preview based on the first 20 hours and kinda just on gameplay, no story. For our actual first review, we'd need to wait until September, when Zosha Arashan would post their fully scored review of the Japanese version just about a month before the US release. This is an extremely positive review, ultimately awarding the game a 9.5. Particular focus is placed on the fantastic writing for the various characters throughout the game, a sentiment that has certainly stuck with the game 20 years later. Gameplay is also highly praised as an improvement on what they viewed as a very strong foundation from the original game. Honestly, one of the biggest complaints in this review is actually targeted at the graphics. While the art design is certainly strong, it seems that compared to what else was available on the GameCube at the time, Thousand Year Door wasn't really showing off the hardware, and even then, it would occasionally run into frame rate issues. Which, if you look at some of the games that were available on the GameCube before 2004, yeah, I can kinda see where they're getting at. Ultimately, the review concludes that Paper Mario RPG is a fantastic addition to anyone's GameCube library. It manages that difficult balance of being both easily accessible and catering to more complex gameplay and strategies. There's simply so much to see and do in Paper Mario, with secrets galore. With its entertaining characters and script and absolutely fantastic gameplay, Paper Mario will be a gem for generations to come. Intelligent Systems has raised the bar again. Our review for the Western release would come about 2 weeks after launch, on October 24th, 2004, and was written by Michael Cole. This review isn't quite as heavy on the praise, but it's still overall very positive, landing on a score of 8 out of 10. Like Zosha's review, Michael praises the writing and improved battle system. He also isn't quite as harsh on the graphics, but does echo similar performance complaints in certain scenarios, where the frame rate would drop. Instead, his criticisms lie more on the game's reliance on heavy backtracking, saying that its extended length compared to the original is essentially being artificially inflated. Both reviews also highlight the music as not quite being up to the Nintendo standards of the time. But perhaps the most interesting thing in retrospect is that one of the most consistent issues raised by the reviews and previews is Thousand Year Door's similarity to the original Paper Mario. In the modern context, where a very loud portion of the fanbase is demanding a return to this format, I did find it funny that this was actually highlighted as a negative back in 2004. Regardless, both of these reviews are very positive, as were the previews prior to launch. Gameplay and writing were universally seen as strong points, while elements of sound design, technical performance, backtracking, and similarity to what had been done previously were seen as negatives comparatively. I found this fascinating from a modern perspective, where outside of backtracking, I don't really hear people bring up those other issues. On the contrary, it seems a large portion of the fanbase wants more Paper Mario to play exactly like the original and Thousand Year Door. I'll also highlight those performance complaints were made towards a game targeting 60 FPS, while its remake appears to be targeting 30 FPS. But maybe that cut to the frame rate will allow it to avoid those dips that were seen in the original. At least you'd certainly hope so. But that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this little look back at the lead up to and release of Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. Were you surprised by any of the issues raised in those original reviews? Did you play this game at launch, and what'd you think of it? You think it holds up? Or perhaps you're planning to play it for the first time via the HD version on Switch? Let me know. And of course, remember to subscribe to Nintendo World Report TV and check out NintendoWorldReport.com for a whole lot more. You can chat with us about this or anything else Nintendo related in our Discord. There's a link in the description. And stick around for information on our Patreon. My name's John Raridan, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. This video is made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Did you know that Nintendo World Report is funded directly by fans like you? When you support Nintendo World Report on Patreon, you get immediate access to multiple exclusive podcasts every month, exclusive Discord channels, an early look at select content, and more, all for as little as $1 a month. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details.